Many of us are reeling from the shock and horror of what is going on right now in Israel. And understandably, we are zeroed in on what is happening and what might happen in that 100-mile radius in the Middle East. Is Israel going to follow through and invade Gaza? Will Hezbollah up in Lebanon open a northern front in this war? What is going to happen to the 200 plus hostages that are being held by Hamas? All of us should be considering these questions and again, zeroing in on this 100-mile radius. But today, I want to zoom out a little bit and ask a question that I don't see a lot of people asking or addressing. And that is, who is really behind what is going on right now in Israel? We know, of course, that Iran is one of the big powers which was behind the October 7th attack by Hamas in Israel. Western media has been talking a lot about the fact that President Biden unfroze $6 billion of money that would be doled out to the Iranian regime just a few weeks before Iran's ally, Hamas, committed that terrorism in Israel. We know, according to the Wall Street Journal, that Iran gave the go-ahead to Hamas in Beirut the Monday before the attack to execute the terrorism. But Iran has been involved in activities in Gaza and with terrorist attacks by Hamas for decades. But there was something about this event that was totally different in its scale. First of all, one of the most advanced and alert countries on the face of the earth was taken by total surprise. I mean, that is amazing. Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, as well as senior commanders in the IDF have admitted this. They've said we had absolutely no idea that this was going to go on. That's a little bit weird. Another thing is that this event is really extraordinary in its scale of casualties. As of the time of this recording, 1,400 people in Israel have been killed. Now, many of that number is Israelis, but also that includes American citizens, British citizens, and other foreigners who were in Israel on October 7th. By the way, to give some scale to that number, because Americans hear 1,400 and they don't really have a sense of how big it is for Israel, America is about 50 times the size of Israel. So if we take that number, 1,400, and multiply it by 50 to see what it would be like if it happened to the United States, it would amount to 70,000 people killed. And on top of the people who are killed, there's some multiple of that have been injured. We know that also October 7th was the day that had the largest amount of Jews killed since the Holocaust. As mentioned, there are approximately 200 hostages which are being held in Gaza. That is an amazing thing. I mean, that is again, extraordinary, not in a good sense, but like out of the ordinary event to happen. And of course, there is a prospect of an imminent bloodbath in Gaza, which could potentially redraw the boundaries of that strip of land. And if Israel does invade Gaza, it might lead to other surrounding nations getting involved and possibly coming to the aid of Gaza and Hamas against Israel. So this event is really different from the other kinds of Iran-supported terrorism in Israel. Many people are lamenting the Israeli intelligence failure, but they don't contemplate that in addition to a spectacular failure, there might have been an intelligence penetration. Are Mossad or Shin Bet somehow immune from having spies infiltrate their agencies? I don't think so. Many people who are watching this show may remember the time in the United States of Aldrich Ames and Robert Hansen. Those were two individuals who worked for the FBI and the CIA respectively, but they were committing espionage against the United States by spying on behalf of the Soviet Union. Israel is not immune from having spies in their agencies. And according to the New York Times, they reported this on October 13th, Hamas had, quote, extraordinary awareness of Israel's secrets and weaknesses. How did they know that? Of course, it is true that Iran is fully culpable in helping Hamas carry out this extraordinary event. But with an event of this severity and magnitude and global reach, I don't think it's likely that this is just the brainchild of one Jew-hating country, especially when we know who that one Jew-hating country's friends are. When the Romans would see an unprecedented, unexplained event that they didn't know who was behind, they would ask this great question, cui bono? Who benefits? If we ask that same question now, who would stand to benefit from something like this? Of course, the answer is Iran, but I also think there's another answer, China, and China's accomplice, Russia. I want to argue that China and Russia may very well have had a hand in orchestrating what happened on October 7th. And if they didn't orchestrate it, I think at the very least, they knew about it and approved of it. So some of you may be watching, hearing me say this and going, okay, that's crazy. Where is your piece of evidence? And the answer is, I don't have a specific, that is absolute 100% proof that China and Russia knew about and perhaps even orchestrated this event. I don't have that. But if we use the Roman idea of who stands to gain, who would benefit from this, we see that there are certain puzzle pieces that sort of make entertaining that possibility more likely. Okay, so let's look at a few of them. First, manufacturing another disaster that the West has to manage and respond to is particularly great for China and Russia right now. Why? Putin is in a stalemated war in Ukraine. It's not going as well for him as he would want. And China has been saying for months that they are looking at Taiwan with lust, wanting to invade Taiwan. Given both of those situations, China and Russia would stand to benefit hugely from having the West distracted from those two developments. Another thing is that, as I just mentioned a few moments ago, China, Russia, and Iran are besties. The three of them have been really working together over the past few months and especially the past few years to assist one another in achieving their respective goals. I talk a lot about these various deals that have been struck between Putin and Xi Jinping and Ibrahim Raisi of Iran and Raisi of Iran and Putin. But it is clear that these three work in tandem with one another. To give just a few examples, China is Iran's #1 trading partner. They just entered an agreement together back in February where they signed 20 economic deals, including a $12 billion transportation agreement that would include China building a high-speed rail line in Tehran and industrializing Iran's airport. China also negotiated a very important diplomatic agreement back in March between Iran and its previous enemy, Saudi Arabia. Iran, in addition to being friends with China, is also great friends with Russia. Iran has been providing a lot of drones to assist Putin in the war in Ukraine. They set up recently a drone factory near Russia to crank even more of those out. In return, Russia sends aid and weapons so that Iran can reverse manufacture them and then use them to give to Hezbollah or Hamas to achieve its respective goals. So the three of these powers work together. So let's just pause for a moment. We know with close to certainty that Iran was behind the October 7th attack. Are you telling me that given Iran's closeness with Russia and China, that if Iran was involved, Russia and China wouldn't have known about it? I'm not so convinced. But even more than that, even more than the benefit of manufacturing another disaster to distract the West, and the fact that these three powers work together, there's kind of a more global thing at play here. And that is that China has been embarking on a multi-pronged, multi-layered, and multi-decade strategy to try to steer geopolitics to be away from the Western bloc and more aligned with a Chinese-centered, anti-Western global order. Allow me to provide some examples. Last year, Xi Jinping founded the Global Initiative to apply, quote, Chinese solutions and wisdom to world politics to combat Western, quote, unilateralism, bloc confrontation, and hegemonism. Also, China has founded the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, a political alliance of non-Western countries, which Iran just joined back in July. Russia is already a member. In August, Iran joined another alliance headed by China, the BRICS group. BRICS is an economic forum. The acronym stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And they are a group of, you guessed it, non-Western countries that are trying to combat Western economic hegemonism. And in August, they inducted all these new members, including Iran and Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the UAE. And now BRICS compromises a third of the world's global GDP. I should say BRICS members comprise a third of global GDP, okay? So given these examples, and there are many more that I'm leaving out, but those are the most salient, we see that China is trying to steer, again, a lot of the world order towards a non-Western alliance, okay? And so they are keenly aware that a war in Israel, a Western American-backed nation, attacking, potentially if they invade Gaza, a non-Western Muslim territory will cause a lot of resentment around the world, especially in the Middle East, and will probably help facilitate some of those countries moving in line with China's anti-Western global order, okay? They know what a kind of Western versus non-Western conflict would do for populations around the world. In addition to trying to create these non-Western alliances and steer people into them, I think that China might have been, particularly upset at a development that happened just 2 weeks before the October 7th terrorist attack in Israel. On September 22nd, again, literally 2 weeks before this happened, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, addressed the UN General Assembly. And he told them that it was, quote, likely that Israel and Saudi Arabia would enter in a diplomatic agreement in the coming weeks. So Prime Minister Netanyahu was holding up a big map in front of the UN General Assembly, which was called the New Middle East. And he said that Israel and Saudi Arabia were on the cusp of something that would, quote, change the Middle East forever, tearing down the, quote, walls of enmity and creating a corridor between Asia through Israel, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and the United Arab Emirates. Isn't it amazing that literally 2 weeks before the largest terrorist attack in Israel, Israel and many of its surrounding nations were about to build on the Abraham Accords and enter into this new, friendly, normalized relationship? Do you think that's a coincidence? That was scheduled to happen, and then 2 weeks later, there's this attack which has totally wiped away any normalizations agreements that were going to happen. And on top of that, let's consider that, as I said, China earlier this year brokered a Saudi-Iran peace deal. Iran and Israel hate each other. Saudi Arabia and Iran previously hated each other. But China's trying to come in and be negotiator in chief. China wants to knock the United States off of being kind of the global negotiator. China went in, made these diplomatic ties between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And so how do you think the CCP reacted when on September 22nd, Israel announced that they would be entering into an agreement with Saudi Arabia? China does not want to see Western and non-Western nations form alliances and become closer to them, and especially when China is not the one in charge of it. China doesn't want these people operating outside of its sphere of influence. And finally, just in case I haven't sufficiently convinced you that there is reason to wonder, at the very least, if China had a hand in this October 7th massacre in Israel, I'll close by telling you about a staggering announcement that you might have missed. This past Sunday, October 15th, so 8 days after the October 7th massacre, China made an announcement that they would be hosting a global gathering in Beijing of 140 countries. 140 countries, to do the math, is 70% of the world. So China's hosting 140 countries, by the way, right now, today and tomorrow, October 17th and October 18th. And the reason, China says, is to commemorate the 10th anniversary of China's Belt and Road Initiative. The Belt and Road Initiative is the effort launched by Xi Jinping, by China, to go in and invest in a lot of different countries, building railway lines in Tehran, building a university in Budapest, etc. Really what China's doing by industrializing in these countries is buying those countries off. But it's just so ironic that all of these countries are going to go to China to essentially celebrate their neo-colonialism by China. But let's not miss this point here. Literally 10 days after the biggest terrorist attack in Israel, which divides Western and non-Western countries, China is hosting a gathering of 140 nations. And guess who's off the list? The United States, most NATO members, and many Western allies like Israel, Japan, South Korea, and of course, Taiwan. Let me tell you what's going to happen at this conference. These nations are going to come to China. They're going to be dazzled by a Xi Jinping-led program. They're going to be flattered and bribed and seduced. And they are going to see, at the direction of Xi Jinping, that China is the main dog in town. China's the one with the money, with the power, and Xi Jinping is going to tout the West's decline, the West's division, and perhaps an impending problem and disaster for the West. And he is going to want to bring all of those people, those non-Western nations, even more in to his circle. You let me know what you think about this hypothesis. China potentially having a hand in the October 7th massacre to steer the world order more towards his hegemonic Chinese global desirous view. Again, please comment. I look forward to hearing your thoughts. You can always email me at julie@julie-hartman.com. A lot more updates with regard to all facets of this Israel situation on this channel. I'll see you soon.